Welcome to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Shade Curry, and I believe every divorced woman deserves a romantic relationship where she feels safe, loved, and cherished. You can create the most amazing life after divorce, and I will teach you how. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I have one of my clients here on the call to talk about her experience working with me, dating after divorce. Very excited to introduce you to Lee. Lee, welcome to the podcast. Hi. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, like what you do, just anything you'd like them to know before we jump in?
Sure. I work as a CRNA, and I have two young kids. They are 4 and 7. I was married for 10 years and have been divorced for about 3.
Yeah, amazing. What's a CRNA?
Certified Registered Nurse Anesthesiologist.
I had to spell that out because literally every time I tried to say it, I could not say it.
Well, they changed it from anesthetist to anesthesiologist, which makes it a little bit easier.
Yes, yeah. And I think what that actually comes into one of the things that played into the work we did together. And I think I'm probably like jumping ahead a little bit, but I recall you had trouble finding, people to date who were working and had a similar income level, similar professions. How did being anesthesiologist,
CRNA,
and then working kind of like the hours that you worked and, being as busy as how did that impact your dating journey?
Right. So it actually did. So I work, I am in the operating room at 6:30 in the morning. I go to bed really early, usually around 8 or 9 p.m. at the latest, at 9 o'clock. And I found that actually that did impact dating. Whenever I was dating people that had different kinds of jobs, where their idea of like staying up late was until midnight, they were really put off by an 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock bedtime. And it definitely affected things. As far as education goes, that ended up being important to me. I was very open-minded. I dated people with all kinds of educational backgrounds, high school diplomas, up to a pediatric oncologist I went out with a couple of times, and everything in between, and realized that the types of conversations I could have with people and the way that I was able to connect was very much influenced, it seemed, by the educational level that different people had. But then I felt guilty for caring about that. And I felt like I was being judgmental or pretentious when I realized it was important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And we cleaned that up when we worked together.
Yes. I brought that up with you, and you agreed with me that it was very important and that there was nothing wrong with looking for someone that has a similar educational background as yourself.
Yeah. And I think it makes it easier. Like then you're narrowing things down, and your profile could go out to attract just that kind of person.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm gonna come back to the beginning. I just gotta talk talking about your work, so I jumped ahead to that question. So you were one of the clients because we worked for a shorter amount of time. Typically, most of my clients, we work together for 6 months. You and I worked together for 3 months, and there was a reason that worked, and that was because you were already pretty seasoned at dating. You were already like on apps, active dating. I think you said you dated you've gone on over 100 dates before.
Oh, at least
before giving me a call.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah,
made you reach out? Like what made you say, hey, I need to change something. I need to add something to my journey to make it work?
right. So I had done a lot of work myself, right? I did after the divorce, I did counseling and therapy. I read books. I joined groups and communities that were, getting over the heartbreak of a divorce and then starting to get back out there. And then I listened to podcasts. I waited a little bit of time after the divorce before starting to date, got back out on the dating field. And I was very intentional with what I did, but I found that although I was basically having a pretty good experience out there, I just was having a hard time meeting somebody that seemed to like check all the important boxes that I wanted.
Mhm.
So I found your podcast. I listened to it probably for a good couple of months, I think. And I really liked what you had to say and your way of going about tackling the issues. And so I decided that I felt like I was really close, but I decided that it was time to have professional help.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. And you were right. You really were close. Like I was going to be preparing for this podcast because I went to kind of over your journey and what we changed and what we did. And it was really like two things really that was significant that I think we worked on. One was on your swiping.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. What do you remember? Do you remember what swiping was like before we worked together and then what you changed and how that impacted your results?
So I have a feeling I was doing what most people do, right? So the big thing is that I was looking at these profiles as future long-term committed relationship guy, right? And so I would look at the profiles, I would see something sort of like innocuous. Like I remember one, I'm more of a cat person. I'm not really a dog person, and they really like dogs. I'm like, well, it'll never work for us because they love dogs and I love cats. So, I would just immediately disregard them. And there were other things that were a little bit less humorous than that. But a big thing that I remember you telling me was that look at it as just somebody that you could sit down and have a cup of coffee with. Look for like the important things on there. Don't get irritated with the fish pictures. The guy that's standing there holding his fish that every male profile seems to have. And don't get caught up too much in how they look on their pictures as well. It turns out, that was another thing that you're glancing really, really quickly at these photographs.
Mhm.
And a lot of people put unflattering photos of themselves up. And honestly, in real life, they look different or they come across differently. You can't see charisma or senses of humor or personality or connection in a photograph.
Yeah. Yeah, that was huge. And I think that, if I recall, that made a huge difference in you meeting your boyfriend now, which I guess maybe I should have led with that so that people know why they're listening to this episode. That you've been in a committed relation after working, with me for 3 months. And there was some overlap with when you met him and, moving into an exclusive relationship with him. But you've been in that relationship now for 4 months and you're happily partnered with him. And we'll get into where you guys are a little later. But I remember, after you'd met him and you'd gone on all these dates and then gone exclusive. And then I asked you what you thought about his photos when you swiped on him.
Right. So, I, I think I might have just swiped past him,
Hmm.
perhaps, if we hadn't been working together. He is an extremely attractive man, but didn't really pick photos that showed him maybe in his best light.
Mhm.
And I remember he was one of the people that said he was a dog person. And I immediately jumped to this conclusion in my head that he probably has three giant dogs at his house, and which is ridiculous, but it's amazing how your brain can do that without you even consciously being aware that you're doing it. And let me see what else. But we had been working together and talking together, and he had a lot of the important things that I was looking for on his profile.
Yeah.
So
Like,
I started to talk to him.
right. Yes. Because like his photos were, I mean, I remember you were, because you were looking for someone pretty attractive. Like, I remember I tend, my clients tend to fall into two categories. The ones that are like, they're flexible. And then the ones who are like, my partner's got to be hot. I think you're one of my partner has to be hot kind of person.
Right. I tried so hard. I went on dates with people I had zero attraction to, and it just did not work out. And I realized it's important to me, and that it's okay that it's important to me.
Yes, it is okay. And it was important to you. And you were also willing to apply the coaching principle of, I'll decide how hot they are when I meet them versus deciding how hot they are from their photos.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, I can tell you that um, I was when I saw him on that first date in real life, the look on both of our faces were just like stars in our eyes. And I remember his face too. He stared at me as though he couldn't believe I was real.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean the difference between looking at, those 5 or 6 photographs that were posted online and then seeing him in person in real life, it was big.
Yeah. Yeah. What were the things? Do you remember any of the things on his profile? So if we weren't using physical attraction, we weren't looking for people that look like a movie star in their photos. What were the things on his profile that made him oh yes, I want to know more? Do you wonder exactly how divorced women just like you are meeting eligible men who want a real relationship and a commitment? They're doing it by dating with their core values. Your core values are the GPS that lead you to the partner you've been looking for. When you use your core values on dating apps, text messages, and at social events, you will easily connect with your true match partner without chasing, settling, or wasting time with non-committal men. I have taught exactly how to do this in the 2-hour Core Values Dating Blueprint course available on my website, shadecurry.com/dating. That's SADECURRY.com/dating. You will learn exactly how to identify your core values and use them on your dating profile, how to ask the right questions via text, and how to tell the right stories on dates so that you attract the right people and repel those who aren't right for you. If you're ready to meet your true match, hop over to shadecurry.com/dating or click the link in the show notes. Now back to the episode.
So we had worked together on developing a list of my non-negotiables as well as my preferences, and kind of really focused on religion,
Mhm.
politics, and education as being kind of like a top 3 priority. We discussed, that it leads to shared values and maybe like a shared outlook at life, or at least it's more likely to. And so for him, we had he had listed the same religious beliefs as me, the same political beliefs as me, and he had the same educational level as me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Um,
so simple,
yeah,
isn't
and I'm really into fitness. I could tell by his profile that he was too.
Yeah.
So that was good. But those were, I think, the top 3 things I was, and he was seeking marriage, and I was too. He had
Yeah.
that listed.
Yeah. And the top three, and for those listening, the top three aren't the same for every person. So these are Lee's top three, but we don't pick the top, like every client has like their whole list and everything. And then but usually what happens is when I talk to a person and we did at least an hour just talking about what your person is like. And at the end of that hour, sometimes for some clients, it's like 2 sessions. We dig deep enough that you can almost see what that person would be like in real life. I can almost get a sense. And then based on getting a sense of what the type of man is, that's when we now work backwards to say, this is what needs to be on your profile. So it's not like I have a checkbox like, okay, if you have the same political belief and the same religious belief and then the same educational level, then you're going to find the person that you want. For some other women, it's the things that really drive their desire for what they want in a partner. It could be completely different from those three things, but these are huge things in your life, so it ended up being the drivers. And really, once you met him, I think when we worked together, usually once you met someone that you were interested in, you were pretty good at getting the conversations going. Again, you were very practiced with dating. So we skipped over a lot of the what to say. I think we had one or two conversations about them, but you were really good. I don't know if you're an extrovert, but you're definitely very social. So it was pretty easy for you to handle all of those in between parts. And then I think the other part that we had to dig deep into was then making those decisions, was evaluating, and then how do I know, am I being too picky? Because you met a lot of good guys. They were mostly really good guys, mostly guys who checked a lot of your boxes, but then most of them, well, I guess all of them except your boyfriend now, were not a fit. And I think for the most part, a few people came close, but it was making that decision that it's okay to let this person go. You weren't being too picky by saying this wasn't the right person and I'm just going to move on to find someone else.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I basically I basically in general had a great time dating, met a lot of nice guys, and yeah, I felt like I was being too picky because here's this nice guy. We had a nice time. They are pleasant and they have their life together, and on the surface, they do check a lot of boxes.
Mm-hmm.
But, and that was the thing, there was always a but, always. And I would be telling you or telling my friends about this date, and I'd be like, well, he's nice. We had a nice time. He does this for work. He's into this. These are his interests. We talked, we laughed, but, and then I'd follow it up with, oh gosh, so many things.
Yeah, I remember one was everything checked out except he was a little boring. You had all of the same shared interests, but his energy just didn't match your energy. The conversation was just like, he was really interested, but the conversation was like flat. I don't know if you remember. He was one of like the last couple before you met your guy.
So I don't remember. I don't remember that one. But I've met several people that were like that because I have high energy. I like to laugh. I have a lot of facial expressions, and I have gone on dates where somebody has no inflection in their tone of voice. They're nice, but they don't make any facial expressions. And I have a hard time engaging with them. But again, it sounds like such a I feel like I'm being too picky. Like it sounds like something that is over the top too picky. And so a lot of the problem is that I was being really hard on judging myself. I didn't want to be too picky. I didn't want to be unkind. I didn't want to come across as pretentious, but I ended up going on dates with people just because I was worried I would sound bad for going after what I actually really wanted.
Yeah. 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 I really have to say you did an amazing job of balancing Like, okay, I'm going to go on a date and really check out this person. But as soon as, which is like one of the principles was, as soon as we establish that he's not right for you, you're going to let him know. You're going to let him go.
Right, right, which is something I hadn't done in the past. I would go on another date, have another boring time, and I'd have a hard time letting them go because they were nice. They were nice guys.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I know a lot of women are afraid that like if they give a guy who doesn't look super hot or whatever on his profile a chance, that they'll get stuck. That then they go on a date and then they won't be able to say no down the line, and then they'll have to marry this ugly foreign person. But the truth is, we have to trust ourselves. We have to like grow that ability to trust ourselves, to be open enough to let people in and strong enough to let people go.
Right. And I never really got stuck too long. I mean, I think I might have gone on a second date that I didn't really want to go on. But I really don't have any problem either telling somebody we're not a fit. But I was wasting time. I was giving second chances to people that I shouldn't have, a second date just to make sure. And when you work full time and you have kids, there's no point. You don't have enough time to do that. If you can tell on date one that you're not interested and you go on a second date because they're nice and maybe things will be different on date two, it's a waste of time. And that's something I remember we talked about.
Yeah, yeah. And for you, because you're seasoned, and there's a little caveat to that. So for women who haven't dated much at all, sometimes the second and third date is useful, not so that the guy will change, but so that they can understand why they don't like him. So sometimes I will push women to be like, okay, I know he's not the one for you, but we need a little education here. So you're going to go on that second date. But you were always able to tell me like right away, okay, it's because of this. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. But for some, in fact, I remember I have a client that I had her go on 7 dates with this guy.
Oh, wow.
Because he checked everything, but she knew he wasn't the one. And I was like, it's really important for you to find out why. Because if you don't know why, what will happen is when you meet the next person, you'll start comparing this next person to this other guy because you don't know why you let him go. And then your mind will be in the past. And it just creates this like clutter in your mind. And so I think it was right around the 5th to 7th date, she was like, I think it's the fact that he's not as healthy and active as I am. So like they went on a wide range of dates. And I think on the dates where they were more hiking or doing something more active, he had a hard time keeping up. And the more he had a hard time keeping up, the lower her interest and attraction for him went. And so once she pinpointed that, I was like, yeah, so that means that we need to add that to your criteria. We need to add that you need someone who matches your level of physical energy, who can hike, who can climb, who can do things, because that's important for her for chemistry. But that's the longest, and it was her choice. She could have let him go at any point in time also, but she really wanted to find this out about herself. But it took 7 dates for her to pinpoint it, because other than that one thing, that was her guy. Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy. And I've had that. I've had long-term relationships where there was one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I could never feel 100% okay with it. I spent a lot of time questioning it, and sometimes that one thing, it almost seemed like, well, does it really matter?
Yeah.
But it
So
does.
I've had that question. People have asked me that question. Like, if a guy is 80% or even 90% of what you want, should you just go exclusive with him? I'm like, it depends on which 10% is missing.
Right.
If he's 90% of what you want and the 10% that's missing is character or his ability to parent your children or like something that's a deal breaker, then you can't, even if he meets 90% of everything else. So it really depends on what 10% is missing. So for some women, that 10% that's missing is like not a big deal. For some other people, that 10% is like everything. Like for me, part of my 10% would be someone who didn't read. There are a lot of brilliant, successful, amazing men who don't read. Like I know some of them, like some of my friends' husbands. I have a friend whose husband is a successful business owner, great guy, great dad, great husband. He doesn't read books. He says, like, I remember one day he told me, he was like, I haven't read a book since I left college.
Mm.
And I was like, that's part of my, like, I don't care if you're everything else. If you don't read, if I can't share that part of my life with the person, it's just it's not going to work. So it really depends on what the 10% is, which is why it's not as simple as telling women that they were being too picky. Like, you know.
Right, right. And I remember you shared that with me, and I liked it because I could see you going and telling your friends, "Oh, he's perfect, but he doesn't read," and them saying, "You're too picky. You're who cares? How does that matter? What is that going to affect everything?" But it's important to you,
Mhm.
and it's okay that it's important to you.
Yes.
And so with me, I had the same things where I was more worried that other people were going to judge me that it was important to me and
Mm.
tell me that it was over the top, and having permission, not permission, but having you affirm that it's okay that that's important to you, even if everybody else tells you it's stupid and it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Well, let's get to the good stuff. So let's talk about your journey with your boyfriend. Like, do you want to just talk a little bit about like your first date and how you moved from that first date to where you are now, where you're talking marriage?
Sure. So, the first date that we had, we had talked on I met him on Bumble, and we had talked on Bumble for several days when we're having really great conversations, found that we had a ton of stuff in common. And I actually asked him out. So I said, I feel like we have enough in common to meet in person. How about we get together for drinks, appetizers,
Hmm.
something like that? And he agreed. We met, and again, in real life, it was incredible. There was instant, just about instant chemistry and instant connection,
Yeah.
which I had never really experienced before going on dates, meeting somebody. And we had an amazing first date. Kissed on, at the end of the first date. And just from then on out, we just couldn't stop talking to each other. And honestly, I we both decided very quickly that we weren't interested in dating anybody else. We
Yes.
were only
I remember
interested.
that.
Yes, yes.
And the reason I say that, listeners, is that when working with my clients, we have like we generally have like a ballpark. So every woman will have a ballpark of like, okay, I will go exclusive about this time from when I meet someone. And Lee broke all the rules with when she went exclusive with her person.
Right, right. I did. I did. I broke all the rules, but I was so sure. A I had a second date planned with somebody else. A nice guy, an attractive guy, an educated guy, a guy that actually shared my political, educational, religious beliefs. We had a nice time together. We really did. We talked for hours. And I had a second date planned with him. And after meeting my current boyfriend, I couldn't even fathom going on a second date with this other guy. Couldn't even. I was going to. I know you encouraged me to do it and to keep my options open. Uh, but I was so utterly sure. So I canceled that second date. My boyfriend told me very early on that he wanted to pursue me exclusively, and that he made a decision not to date anyone else, but that he did not expect me to make the same decision, and that he was not um expecting anything. He just wanted me to be aware that that was what he was choosing to do. And actually, that was an amazing thing to hear, and it gave me the freedom to make the same choice myself with him. And so we became exclusive very quickly. I think after maybe 3 or 4 dates.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, it was like 2 weeks. Was it?
Maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was
So
2 weeks.
maybe maybe 4 dates.
Yeah. But what's the amazing thing is I love it when women do things with their eyes open. Like you were aware that you were taking a risk,
Correct.
that it might be too early and that it might not work out. But you were like, okay, eyes wide open. I know this might be too early, but I want to put all my energy here. Versus, I think what happens to a lot of other women is they go exclusive too early out of pressure and scarcity. You didn't have any scarcity. You knew you could jump right back into the pool and meet another 100 guys.
Right, right. There was no scarcity. I had a second date lined up. I had other people that I was chatting with. Yeah, I didn't feel forced or pressured or had any sense of scarcity. It was definitely intentional.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that. And again, like within my practice, it's, I'm always there. I'm always like playing devil's advocate, but I'm also like, the whole point of after a divorce is to make choice. It's like to create that self-trust is for my
Right.
clients to like to be able to trust yourself, which is what we didn't do way back in our early marriages was trust ourselves and trust our instincts. And so I do give, my clients, not give, you have the freedom to make your own choices, but we have guidelines. So we have this loose structure around your journey. But you went exclusive early, which was amazing. And it was like, yeah, we'll just circle back if it doesn't work out. Um, and then you went on a trip, which that was amazing. Do you remember? How did that come about?
Oh,
Before you
so
talk about the trip, before you talk about the trip, I actually want to say, because I think one of the reasons the trip came up was because when we talked about what do we do now that you're exclusive, how do we change the timeline? And I think what we had decided was that you needed to do the work since you were exclusive and you had gone exclusive early, you needed to do the work that, so let's say exclusivity was 8 weeks for you. I don't remember exactly what we had decided earlier. You needed to accelerate the work of casual dating, which was the bucket you were in. You needed to accelerate all of that stuff that you typically would have done before going exclusive in the exclusivity stage. So we think you went on a trip, I think you did a couple of blind dates. There were a couple of things that you did pretty early on to like be sure that you had made the right decision.
uh
So when I say
so
blind dates, not blind dates, double dates.
double dates. Yes, double dates. Yes. So yes, right. So Um the trip was I had a trip planned with my best friend and her husband to celebrate our 40th birthdays to go to Greece. And I had everything booked, paid for, planned, and I ended up inviting my boyfriend to come with me after 4 dates on this trip to Greece, which a lot of people thought was a little crazy. But first off, it felt right. It just felt right. I'm very picky who I travel with. And he and I had such an intense connection and we're having such incredible conversations. And um, you can tell somebody's your soulmate quickly. I think that's one thing. You don't have to wonder about it. If you're wondering about it and you're not sure, then they're not. And so you and I talked, and actually, I thought you were going to be very against it, but you were actually very for it. What's a better way to get to know somebody on an international trip where you are going to be spending, I think it took me 22 hours to get there, 19 hours to get back. My best friend and her husband, everyone's going to meet. There's no pretending. You can't hide if you are traveling with somebody and you're going to be with somebody for a full week nonstop. And then you can see how people interact, and you'll find out very, very, very quickly if you like this person or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the trip. And then, yeah, we did a couple of double dates. You encouraged me to ask to meet friends and family. And so did a double date with the sister and with another one of his friends, plus a double date with my friends. And we discussed that afterwards.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yes. So good. And I love this because these are all the things that I think this is what we all want. This is all what when we're dating, this journey is what we all want to get to. Except it's like this one or zero. Until you get there, it can feel like you'll never get there.
Right. And that is how I had been feeling for most of the dating life. Um, and then when it happens, it's incredible how quickly it happens.
Yeah. 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 How did you introduce your children? Because he has children, you have children.
Right. So you and I discussed that. You recommended waiting 3 months,
Mhm.
and that is something I stuck to. And so I have two, he has two. They're the same age. We have the exact same custody schedule. And I ended up throwing together a little Christmas party for a couple of my friends that also have kids, and then invited him and his children to come over so that it would be low pressure, um, very casual, just watch how the children interact with each other, get to know each other's kids, see each other's kids in a very relaxed environment.
Yeah. How did that go?
Oh, it went incredible. It went incredible.
Ah, amazing.
My daughter, yeah, my daughter and his daughter are extremely similar personality types and became instant best friends.
Oh.
Instant. Uh, my youngest and his youngest are also very similar. They
Mhm.
play well, but they're a little bit more independent. It was love at first sight, soul connection for the kids, as same with us,
Yeah. Yeah.
honestly.
And I love that. And I love that you found someone in a similar life situation as you. Because I know that's a worry for a lot of people. Like, oh, I have small kids. Nobody's going to want a woman with small kids. Oh, I have teenagers. Nobody's going to want a woman with teenagers. Or I have no kids. There's always, we all think that nobody wants the situation that we're in. But you're the perfect example that, like, there are people in your similar situation and
Right.
you'll be a fit.
Exactly. Yeah, I actually before him used to date people that didn't have kids because I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to deal with custody schedules. I didn't want to deal with the issues that would come with someone that has teenagers versus myself having small kids. And meeting someone that was in the same situation as me, same number of kids, same ages, same custody schedule. Never even occurred to me I could find that.
Yeah, yeah. How did you have the conversation about marriage?
Oh, that's a good one. So he, it was first brought up when he asked me on a date if pretty soon, I think within the first month of us dating, if I would ever get married again. And my response was, yes, if I find the right person. How about you? And he said, prior to meeting you, my answer was no. Now that I've met you, my answer is yes, I would.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I think after that, because you hadn't told me that detail, and we had talked about, you guys had that conversation, and then we talked about the timeline because I think that's one of there are a lot of things that sometimes look like they're happening on the surface. And then as a coach, I always want to make sure it's happening like for real or it's happening in a way that matches my client. And we had talked about discussing what that timeline for marriage would look like. And you had to bring that up because
Right. So maybe remind me what we said about the timelines.
I think your
Also,
timeline was a year. I think you had a timeline of a year, but we didn't know what his timeline was.
right, right. So,
And so I had asked you to ask him what his timeline was for marriage.
right. So I did, and he and I have had so many conversations since then. It's hard for me to remember what he
That's
first
true.
said.
And if you don't remember, that's fine. I remember it was one of the things that, because those were things that typically I would ask a client to do before going exclusive. So that you're just sure you're on the same page with the person. But since you hadn't, we kind of made like this little short list of things that needed to come up. And if you don't remember this, not a
I
problem at all.
remember sitting down and having the conversation and being nervous about having the conversation. And but at the same time, it was something that was bothering me. So I needed to talk about it. I wanted to know what a timeline would be. I'm a little bit type A in some ways.
Yeah.
And he and I talked about it, and I'm pretty sure his response was to throw the question back at me. What did I think of as a timeline? I told him, I think I told him about a year for marriage, and he said, that sounds good. Honestly, since then, I think we're moving it up a little bit
Yeah, so
instead of waiting a full
tell us
year.
about that. I know you told me before we started recording, but I'm sure the listeners want to know an update.
So he is actually going to be discussing that with my dad this evening. He and my dad, I introduced them. My dad lives pretty far away, but and this is not, to be clear, something I did with most people I dated, but I told my dad I'm dating somebody that I think might be, I think he's the one. And I introduced him to my dad. They've become extremely good friends and actually spend hours FaceTiming with each other when I'm not around.
Yes.
And yeah, my dad's very old fashioned. My boyfriend's very old fashioned as well. And he is going to be talking to my dad about that this evening.
He's
Uh,
asking for your hand in marriage.
right.
How does that feel? How does that feel like to be here, to be in this spot?
It
Um,
feels extremely surreal.
yeah.
Honestly, it feels extremely surreal. If you had asked me, you know, 5 months ago that I would meet someone and we'd be talking marriage in 4 months, I would have said absolutely not. No way. Not going to happen. That's too fast. That's too soon. Um, I, I don't think I wouldn't have believed it. And if you said that I could meet somebody that had not only every non-negotiable that I was looking for, but out of the 60 preferences listed, has all but two, I also would have said that that's impossible because my preferences were a little ridiculous, some of them. And he has, I think one preference was I like dark hair, dark eyes, and he has blonde hair, blue eyes. That is not a deal breaker. It is not
Yeah.
important. Um, so when I say that was like one of the two preferences that doesn't fit, I want to believe it. I honestly would not believe this.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is. And kudos for you for, doing the work to believe that like you could have what you wanted and being willing to take the risks, do the work. I mean, you made time in your schedule to go on these dates.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
You know,
It's work. It's work.
it's work. It is work. Yes, and you did it. You made the space. You believed enough in yourself and in your commitment and your desire, in your goals and in your dream to go on that journey, make time for it, do the things, make the adjustments that were required to hold your standards where they needed to be so that
Right.
you meet the person who was perfect, not just for you, but also for your children.
Right. Right. And I'm so happy I did. I 3 years, over 100 dates, and here I am.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
All right, so I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to just give the listeners. Most of the listeners are women, people socialized as women who are also divorced and dating, looking for their own person. What advice do you have?
Um, so I think a big thing is to look at dating as being fun. If you see it as a chore or as work, or there is something horrible and not enjoyable, you're just not going to do it. I decided very early on to go into dating with a positive attitude. And I think that had a huge effect on the fact that generally I had a positive experience. Even the people, didn't work out before I met my current boyfriend, I enjoyed myself. And I looked at it as a time to get to know another human being, to learn something about somebody's story, and maybe to learn something new that you didn't know by talking to somebody, and to spend a nice fun night out. Same if you were meeting up with a friend or something. I think that would be a big one, is not to be negative, not to be scared, and to remain open throughout all the dating journey,
Yeah,
to not be defensive, to not um give up, to not carry the baggage from whatever dates didn't work out, and to be happy for them.
yeah, yeah. They're
What
learning
else?
opportunities.
Yeah, yeah, and I met some interesting people. I really did. Honestly, I even, I've made some friends. Some of the people who didn't work out stayed friends with me for a couple of years. I
Yeah,
still chat with them. So it was, that part was great. And I think the other thing would for advice, would be to really actually sit down and write out what is non-negotiable for you,
hmm,
and versus your preferences, to go over it with somebody that you trust, so that your non-negotiables are literally non-negotiables and not just preferences, so that when you meet a nice guy and who seems to have all the things you want, that you have something to refer back to and to look at. And then also to give yourself permission. That was a big one with me, is, as you said, with giving yourself permission for books to be really important for you, for
hmm,
me to give myself permission for um, educational levels to be important, for us having shared values.
yeah,
Because I tried dating people from different religious and political backgrounds and being as open as I could. And I just realized that you just don't have the shared values that you're looking for in many cases that
yeah,
way. So giving yourself permission to actually like really accept the things that you find important to you, whether or not your girlfriends or your parents or your coworkers think it's important.
yeah. Amazing. All right, the last question. Well, actually, it's two questions in one. Your favorite part about working with me, your least favorite part about working with me.
um, so my favorite part about working with you was having somebody to go through this with. Like, you and I was sat down and went, I think we spent 2 or 3 sessions, probably at least two, going through who I was saying yes to and who I was saying no to and why, and discussing it
Yeah,
in depth. And that made the biggest difference. You told me to click yes to anyone that was a 6 or above, and
yeah,
that had um, listed a couple of the major things, that was looking for a long-term committed relationship and had some shared beliefs as me. Say yes, go on a coffee date. I don't have to think of them as like future husband, and all I have to do is think about them as someone to have coffee with. And that was really helpful. So that was one of my favorite things. Least favorite things, I was very, I remember being very nervous about telling you he and I had gone exclusive so fast, which was strictly against your advice. Very strictly against your advice. I remember I felt like I was a kid that was confessing
Oh,
something to my mom. I broke the rules.
well, I'm so glad you told me. Yeah,
but
yeah,
I but I told you, and it was fine. You weren't exactly upset by it, and I wasn't the first client to do that. And in fact, you encouraged it and brought up some, now that we're exclusive, let's meet the families. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. Let's meet the kids maybe sooner than we would have if we hadn't been. And all that was really, really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so happy for you and seeing you happy, seeing your kids happy, knowing that you are, you've achieved this dream. This is why I do what I do. This is what makes me happy. Like sometimes like little text messages that my clients have sent me when they met someone or when they've gone exclusive or little things like that. I'll scroll through them and be like, yes, this is, just to remind myself that like this work is important and this podcast is important.
Yes.
Because sometimes I'm so far down the line. I mean, I will celebrate 6 years meeting my husband in a couple of months. So sometimes I forget what it was like not having him in my life, being single, being alone. And so stories like yours continue to inspire me and remind me, what I do and are an encouragement to the listeners because they're coming up behind you. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your
Yes. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I look forward to hearing your future updates. I know you will be working with another coach on your premarital coaching communication things. So I'm excited to hear how that goes and when you guys set a date, all of that. I love hearing all those updates. So I look forward to hearing about that from you. I just want to thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, listeners, we want to thank you for spending this time with us today. If Lee's story has inspired you, we want to hear from you. Send her some congratulations. If you follow me on socials, send her congratulations when we put this out there, or just send an email and I will pass on your congratulations since we're kind of keeping this confidential. I know a lot of my clients who are not entrepreneurs or coaches prefer to keep their stories private, which I totally understand. So we're going to keep this one private, but I will pass on any thoughts that you have for her. So thanks for your time and attention, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening today. If you are ready to get married after divorce, I want to invite you to download my free 8-video training specifically designed to help divorced women date with ease and get married again. Head over to SadeCurry.com to get started. That's SadeCurry.com. I'll see you inside.